Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meet again, and in this tutorial we're going to be looking at the Progressive Lightmapper in Unity. Now I've got a Cinema 4D scene open here. It's just a room, it's very simple. We've got a room here, we've got a few objects in there. I've just got some paintings on the wall. They're basically boxes with the backs cut off and you know, a picture map to it. I've got a wall material and a floor material. You know, it's all very simple. It's not, you know, the greatest model in the world, but it will serve our purposes. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about this scene. So you can see up here we've got a null called room, and inside that we've actually got a room object. There we go. And as you can see, there's some other there's separate objects within that, which are the paintings, the box, the glass on the windows are a separate object as well. And yeah, that's about it really. I've also got another object which I've called Room Shadow Caster, which is basically the outside of this building. Now there's a very good reason that I've actually separated this outside part from the inside part, which will become apparent as we go along. And the other objects I've got in here, this is this animated sphere here. And I've just animated it moving around the room. Now I've done this because in Unity this will help to show sort of lighting and reflections for dynamic objects. So obviously because this is moving around and it's animated, it won't be baked via the Progressive Lightmapper. So to make it fit in with the scene so it doesn't look like a sore thumb, we'll have to use light probes to help blend it in. Okay, so that's our scene. Just to quickly go over the materials, very simple. Obviously on the glass I've got a transparent material, this glass material. That will just come across the Unity called glass, and it'll probably be an opaque material, and we'll have to set it up in Unity. Our walls, very simple. I've just got a normal map. I mean, the reflections channel's turned on, but that's not going to be carried across to Unity, or the diffuse channel, so I mean those could be turned off. It's just the colour and the normal that will get come across there. So very simple materials. Like I said, this isn't about materials, this is about lighting. This is about sort of, you know, baking light maps and stuff. I've got a floor in there as well. Again, it's just a normal map that will be carried across, and the colour channel. So very simple. So the first thing I suppose we should do is fire up Unity. Just to make note that I'm using Unity 2018.1.3 F1. So if your version of Unity looks a little different, or the settings are in sort of different places, you may be using a newer version or an earlier version. Okay, so let's start by creating a new project. I'm going to create new. It's going to say where's the location. I've got it in my documents, so I set up a folder there called Unity Projects, and that's where all my projects go. It'll ask for the title. I'm going to just call it Progressive Lightmapper. There we go, that'll do. The template's 3D. Everything's fine there, so I'm just going to create the project. Okay, so this is what my Unity looks like when it opens up. Yours may be arranged slightly differently, so I'm just going to go over that quickly. When yours opens up, if it's the first time you've opened up Unity, it's probably going to look like this, which is the default layout. I absolutely hate this layout. So if you want yours like mine, you go up to Window, go to Layouts, Tool, and then you'll go to this little drop down here and just say one column, and this will be your project folder, and this is your scene hierarchy up here. So I'm gonna go to actually our project panel here and create a folder, and I'm actually going to call this hashtag imports. Now I've named it hashtag imports because this is listed out alphabetically, and I want my imports folder at the top so I can easily find it basically. And that's where our FBXs are going to go when we export out of Cinema 4D. The next thing we need to do is actually save our scene. At the moment it's called sample scene, and you can see down here that's where it's saved. And that's basically just a placeholder when you first open Unity. In older versions it doesn't do that, you'll have to save. But I'm going to save anyway, and I'm going to call this Progressive Lightmapper. So let's grab the name from the path there, and I'm just going to call my scene Progressive Lightmapper, and you can see it's saved it here. This scenes folder is now obsolete because I've saved my scene, so let's delete that. And we've saved our scene. So you're probably thinking the first thing we need to do is get our objects in this scene. But there's one thing that I do every time that I start Unity up, and that is change the lighting model. By default, the lighting model in Unity is set to gamma. And if you're using a PBR workflow, or you know, the standard shader in Unity, if you're using PBR materials, gamma is not the way to go. Light doesn't fall off as accurately. It's just a different lighting model. So you're probably thinking, why have these options? And there's a good reason. Some platforms that you're building to may not support a linear workflow. That might not be the look you're going for. There's many reasons, but I'm going to be choosing linear. So let's go up to Edit, go down to Project Settings and go to Player. I'll open up this window here and you can see the color space is set to gamma. I'm going to choose linear. Like I said, light falls off more naturally. It travels further, I find, and all that kind of thing. So there we go. Color space set to linear. That's the first thing I do when I open Unity, and now we can get to actually exporting from Cinema 4D. So let's open Cinema 4D back up. I'm going to export my room. So I'm going to select my room, okay, because I just want to export this. In fact, these are going to be separate FBXs. I'm going to have my room as one FBX, I'm going to have my room shadow caster as another, and the animated sphere as another. So select the room, go to File, Export, FBX. It will say, where do I want to save it? Now, this is something that Cinema 4D does that I find quite annoying. When I say export as, the folder that it'll open up at, the path, will always be where the Cinema 4D file is saved. Even if you've exported to another location, the next time you export, it'll always open up where the C4D file is saved, which is rather annoying. I wish it would remember the path so you didn't have to keep navigating to that place. So, seeing as that isn't something that Cinema 4D does, I'm going to create a little shortcut, if you like. So my Unity project is saved in my documents, so I can get quick access here. Go to Unity Projects, Progressive Lightmapper is my project, go into Assets, and there's my imports folder. Now I'm actually going to drag my imports folder here into my quick access, so I can just click on that and get access to it every time. Now, as you see down here, the file name's Unity Progressive Lightmapper FBX. I don't want that. I'm exporting my room. So I'm going to type room and then press save. And then it'll open up the FBX export settings. So the FBX version I'm using is the latest one. By default, cameras, splines and lights are turned on. And so are tracks. And I don't know if normals is or not, but I'm choosing to export the normals. And here we have textures, materials, embed textures and substances. Now, all of that is default, I think, apart from this selection only. What that does, it basically says instead of exporting the entire scene as an FBX, it'll only export what you've got selected. Now, I selected my room, and we've got this selection only. So all of this is okay. We've got cameras, splines, lights, but I've got none of them in my scene anyway, so they won't get exported. Tracks is if you've got animation on an object. Well, the object that I've got selected at the moment hasn't got any animation on it, so nothing will come out of that. Okay, so that's good. Let's press OK. Done. It's exported to Unity. Let's go back to Unity. And that'll now see that we've got our room object in our imports. So basically I'm going to grab my room and drag it into my scene. And there we go. We've got a room. Oh no, there's no materials on it. And if we actually go into our room and I press the cube, you can see that we've got some stuff with colours on it there. But there's no floor material, there's no wall material. In earlier versions of Unity, it would just extract all that information. In 2018, I've got to click on our room FBX in the project window, and usually it's on this tab. But if you go across to materials, you can see that we've got this location, use embedded materials. If you drop that down and just say use external materials, legacy, and then apply, it'll actually extract my materials and the textures. Here we've just got a little normal map settings pop up. It's saying a material is using a texture as a normal map, but it's not being marked as a normal map in Unity. You just press this Fix Now button and it will make sure that that's recognised as a normal map. So this is what our scene looks like. There's a couple of things we've got to sort out though. If I go into the room, you can see that even though this is a room that's blocked off, light is still coming in, and we've got some weird shadows going on there. And that's because in Unity, light will travel through the back face of a polygon. It won't see it. They're not two-sided. It only recognises the front face of a polygon. But we're going to deal with that in a minute. The other thing, our windows, they're completely opaque. So let's have a look at those. Let's click on our windows. As you can see, we've got this orange sort of outline when we select stuff, kind of like Cinema 4D. I find it quite annoying. So I'm going to go to the gizmos and I'm going to say turn off selection outline and turn on selection wire. Also, I think I'm going to get rid of the grid as well so we don't see that, and that should be okay. Okay, so now I've got my windows selected. If you just click on that, you'll see in the inspector the information about this object and its material. So if we drop down this material, we can see it's got a colour, which is grey. I'm going to change that to white for now. And we're using the standard shader, and rendering mode is opaque. Well, I'm going to drop this down and say, well, we want transparent. We want this to be a transparent object. Okay, so what dictates the transparency of this object? It's not, well, you can't see through it. And that's because it's decided by the alpha of the albedo. So if we click on the colour of the albedo, which is basically the colour channel, and then mess with this alpha, bring it down, you can see that we're getting it more see-through now. Now, as we all know, glass has a tint usually. So I'm actually going to change the colour of this to black and then just push up you can see it getting darker there. So I'm just going to make sure that it's not 100% transparent, maybe something like that. Something there, we can always tweak it later, but at least it's see-through now. Okay, so we got our room in. Let's talk about the Progressive Lightmapper. So we want to look at the settings for our Progressive Lightmapper, but we need to open the lighting window. So let's go to Window, all the way down to Lighting, and then choose Settings. It'll open up this window, and I'm just going to grab it by the tab here and move it across next to our inspector. So now we can flick between these two. Okay, so if we go to our lighting window, we've got quite a lot going on here. We've got environment at the top, and as you can see, we've got this default skybox. We don't really need to worry about any of this. In fact, I'm going to close this up because that's fine as it is. We've got real-time lighting. You'll find that this is probably checked on by default. I've turned it off. You've probably got auto-generate on like I've got down here. So basically, if you mark something as static, lightmap static, this will begin baking straight away. And every time you make a change, it will rebake, which can be handy if you want to iterate as you're working. But in my case, I'm going to turn this off. I only want it to generate the light maps when I press this generate lighting button. I'm going to turn it off for now so it's not constantly baking every time I move something. Okay, so this real-time lighting, we don't want real-time global illumination. It's not really real-time, it's pre-computed, but I've turned that off. And then under mixed lighting, we've got this turned on, and that's exactly what we want. Under the light mapping settings, this should be set to progressive. I think it does that by default, but if you're seeing Enlighten, change this to progressive because that's what we're talking about. This lighting mode, we've got shadow mask, subtractive, and baked indirect, and we're going to be talking about that a little later. But for the time being, let's just hit the generate lighting button and see what happens. Well, as you can see, bugger all, nothing has happened, and that's because we've got to tell Unity that this room object here, this in our hierarchy, is actually marked as light map static. It basically says this needs to be light mapped, it's not going to move anywhere, I need you to bake it. So if you select room and make sure you go to your inspector and select the room, we've got this little checkbox at the top here called static, and now if I drop that down, you've got a few things you can mark it as. Everything, light map static, occluder static, batching static, blah, 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 and all the rest of it. For ease of use, if I just wanted this to be light map static, Drop that down and say light map static and just click this. Later I'm also going to want it to be reflection probe static, but just for easy view, so I'm just going to check this checkbox and it will say, do you want to enable the static flags for all the children objects as well? Well, yes I do. We've got this null called room and a load of objects in it, so yes, change children. And if we drop down now, we can see that everything's been ticked. That's great. So if I go back to the lighting panel and click generate lighting, you'll see something happen. And there we go. Something's happening, something's kicked off, but we're getting some very, very strange results there. And that's it, finished. Now, I think you'll agree, this does not look right. And there's a very, very good reason for that. We have got UVs for where our wall material is, so that's on UV1, and the floor, and you know, we've got UVs for that. But the light map needs a second set of UVs to tell it where to put, well, the light map. We could do this in Cinema 4D. We could go to our room object. You can see we've got UVs here. In fact, let's have a look at them. Let's go to UV edit. And this is our UVs for our room. Now you can see they're all laying on top of each other and crossed over and all the rest of it. Now we could actually generate a second UV tag for this room and make sure that all the UVs are separated out so they're not overlapping. But we can actually have Unity do this for us. Sometimes Unity does a great job at this and sometimes not such a great job. So depending on the object, you may want to create a second UV yourself. But because this is basically very sort of linear, it's like a box shape for the most part, it's not very organic, Unity will probably do a pretty good job at sorting this out. So I'm just going to go back to this view, go back to our Unity scene and go back down to our project window here and actually click on the FBX and go to the inspector, go to the model tab, and we've got this generate light map UV. So Unity will basically, without this checked on, what it's using is actually the UVs from UV1, and as you can see this looks awful because they're all crossed over. You know, you can see here we're getting some errors where UVs are laying on top of each other. So we can say generate light map UVs, and what Unity will do is use UV1 as a reference but then spread them out so they're not overlapping. So let's check that on. Just to note that that's not enough that you just check that on. You've got to actually apply. So there's an apply button down here, and then this will apply the changes. Now if we go back to lighting and hit generate lighting, you'll see that something's happening now. And that's it, finished. And still, it doesn't look great. It's not very good at all, really. It's because we haven't really set up our settings for our light map. So the first thing I want to do, straight off the bat, let's go to our lighting window. It's set to progressive, great. It's also set to shadow mask. Now I'm going to actually change this to baked indirect. And underneath it says mixed lights provide real-time direct lighting, while indirect light is baked into the light maps and light probes. Okay, so let's try this again. Not much change there. It looks kind of the same as it did before, and that's because of our directional light. Do you remember earlier when I said a real-time light, it won't recognise the back face of a polygon? And that's obviously evident here because these walls aren't, you know, producing shadows, and it's because the light is travelling straight through the back face of this wall, which is not visible here but visible there. So let's choose our directional light that's already in the scene and go to inspector. This is set to mixed. Let's change this to baked. Okay, go back to our lighting and generate lighting. Okay, now we're getting something a little bit more closer to what we'd actually want. It's quite dark in here for several different reasons, and the bake isn't particularly good either. We're getting there. We've got some seams going on here. Well, there's several reasons for this. Let's have a look at the light map settings first. So we've got it set to progressive. This prioritized view, it basically means that whatever you're looking at, that's what will get progressively baked first, which is really handy because if you want to sort of go, oh, did I sort out a problem here? you can go there and it'll do this part first and you'll go great, and then you can spin the camera around and go here, and then it will prioritize this view. That's what that means. Next, we've got direct samples and indirect samples. This is just the amount of samples that it shoots into the scene, if you like, the amount of rays or photons. Here we have bounces. It's set to 2 at the moment, so this is how many times light will bounce. You'll get direct light coming in, bang, it will hit the floor. It will bounce off of the floor and take some of, and its energy will be reduced slightly because of absorption, but it will take some of the colour of the floor with it. And then, boom, it lit something else and that's bounced too. Just to brighten this room up a little bit, I'm actually going to put 4 bounces. The maximum is 4, and it's because that after 4 bounces, there's not too much energy that will make significant changes for the amount of calculation that Unity will have to do. So I'm going to change that to 4, and I'm going to generate lighting again. A little bit better. Not much, but yeah, we're getting there. Okay. There's something else that is causing this very dark scene. Remember when we selected our room and we said, if we go back to the inspector, mark everything as static? Well, there's a few objects in this room that don't need to be static, and I bet you can guess what they are. There's actually a view to visualize this, which is quite helpful. If you go up here, we're in the shaded view at the moment, but if we go all the way down here, we can see baked light map. So if we click on that, it gives us a sort of UV grid, and it actually shows what's being baked. It kind of just shows the lighting. In fact, we can turn off the UV view as well. At the bottom here, it says show light map resolution. If I turn that off, this is just a representation of our light map. And you can see it's very dark. Now notice these windows. These windows have been marked as light map static, so they are actually getting baked into the light map. So let's just turn our resolution back on again. Now it's glass, it's a transparent object. There's probably absolutely no reason why these objects should be included in our light map bake. So let's choose these glass objects. I've got glass, glass 2, glass 3. We can choose all of them. That should select the windows up here, and obviously look, we've got the skylights, we've got a window downstairs, we've got these 3 windows, and we've got a window up here. So there should be enough light spilling into this room, but there just isn't. So I'm actually going to select all 3 of these, drop down this, and untick light map static. They are now not included in and as you can see, they've changed there. Lovely, and these are changed as well, so they're not being included in the light map now. Let's go back to the lighting tab and generate the lighting again. And as you can see, that actually pushed a little bit more light into our scene. Let's go back to the shaded view. Not too much, but you know, it's pretty subtle. But we need to improve the quality of this, and we're having a problem on the stairs there. And it's probably because, well, one, our resolution and the amount of samples in the scene. But you could just leave it like this, just to get an idea of how the lighting is going to be before you do your sort of final bake and that kind of thing. But I'm going to start cranking up the settings. This other settings here, I'm going to close this, we don't need that. So it's just these light map settings that I'm interested in. Okay, so the direct samples, they're 32. They can stay as that. Indirect samples are 256. I'm going to double that to 512, and let's see if that actually makes a difference. It definitely takes a little bit longer to bake the light map. Not too much difference. What about the bounces? Yeah, we put those up. The filtering we don't need to worry about for the time being. In fact, I don't think we'll need to worry about at all. Basically what this does is, for the samples that are generated on our walls, it's kind of like GI in Cinema 4D. Where the samples are, it tries to blend them together by blurring the samples. So this is what this does, basically. Light map resolution. Okay, let's go back to our baked light map view, and let's change our resolution. That may look okay. It's set to 10. Let's set it to 20. Already you can see that the resolution is a lot tighter now. And if we go back to our shaded view and generate our light mapping again, press that button again, we can see that it's cleaned up a lot of the errors that we had a little while ago. Oh. There we go. We're still getting a seam on the floor there. But it's cleaned up that problem that we had on the step. So as you can see, increasing this value actually helps us out a little bit. There seems to be some stuff going on here. But again, we can sort these out. I'm actually going to crank our lightmap resolution up to 40. And I'm going to make the lightmap size. You can see here that it's set to 512. So this is the resolution in texels. If we hover over this, you can see it says sets the resolution in texels that are used per unit for objects being lit by baked global illumination. Larger values will result in increased time to calculate the baked lighting. So this is basically these indirect samples are how many samples there are per texel. Okay, next on to lightmap size. It says 512, so that means that the maximum size the lightmap can be is 512 by 512 pixels. And if you look at the tabs at the top here, we've got scene, global maps and object maps. Let's go to global maps, and this is our light map. This here is a directional map, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But our light map can only ever be 512 big. Well, for doing a room, you know, this size, we're not getting a bad result, but I'd like it to be bigger, get more detail on there. So let's change this to 1K. So we've got 1024 by 1024. You've also got the option to add ambient occlusion to your maps. I'm not going to do that. Underneath, we've got directional mode. Now, what this basically does is, like I said, if we go back to global maps, it creates this secondary map here. If I drag this up at the bottom, it kind of looks like a normal map. And that's because what it's doing is, in directional mode, it will look at the normals of an object or the normal map that it's using and actually consider them in bouncing light. Problem with this is you get an accurate bake, and you will get, you know, say if a ray comes in and hits the side of a normal map, and then it will bounce off in the correct direction. But for something like this, I don't think it's really going to matter too much. And an upshot of doing it this way is that it actually doubles the size of your light map data because it has to make two maps. So I'm going to go back to our scene tab, and I'm actually going to turn directional off. I'm going to turn it to non-directional. So there we go. Let's give it a bake again. Generate light maps. And as you can see, that there's a lot more going on now because I've made the resolution higher, and I've also made the light map size bigger, and this will probably take a little bit longer. So in future, when I start baking, because it might take 30 seconds to a minute or even longer, I will push the video forward for you guys. Okay, well, we're getting some better stuff going on now. A little bit cleaner there in the lighter areas, but we can see that we're still getting blotchiness, some blotchiness and some patchiness going on. But all in all, it's getting better. We've got some errors here. So I'm actually going to start increasing it more. I'm actually going to boost the indirect samples to 1000. And the light map res 60. That should do. And I'm going to hit bake in a second, and I just want you to have a look at what's going on with the bake, and also I'll show you this prioritized view thing as well. So let's generate the lighting. Okay, that's happening, and if I turn it around here, it will start prioritizing whatever I'm looking at. So I can do this. I can even shoot up the stairs here and say, well, I want to see what this wall looks like, and it will prioritize those things. Okay, I'm going to get back downstairs and wait for this bake to finish, and I will fast forward it here. Okay, so our bake's finished, and as you can see, it's a lot better quality. than it was before. It's very dark in here still, so I'm actually going to change the direction of my directional light in a minute. But this is a good example of the GI. You can see the light is hitting the floor, it's taking some of that colour with it, and it's been cast onto the wall there. So there's a good example of the wood there. But like I said, it's very dark. The quality's a lot better than it was. But I think it would be nice if we could shed some light down the bottom end of this room. But before I do, I want to talk about the fact that earlier I was saying that when light comes through the back face of a polygon, it's not blocked. It doesn't see back faces of polygons. You're probably thinking, well, how the hell is this wall casting a shadow then if you know, light travels through the back face of a polygon? That is true for real-time lights. The reason that it's not bleeding through the back face of this polygon is because we're using the progressive render, and I've set the directional light here, if we go to the inspector again, to baked. When you do that, when you've got a directional light set as baked, you know, the progressive renderer is set to baked indirect, a ray will hit a back face of a polygon and the ray will be terminated. It won't travel any further. It will say, right, you've been occluded, and that's why we're getting shadows like this. It's just real-time lights that aren't occluded by the back face of polygons. They will be occluded for a baked light. I'm actually going to clear the generated lighting data, and you can do this by going down to where the generate lighting button is, clicking the arrow and saying clear baked data. So if we do that, we go back to what it was, and again you can see that the light's travelling through the back face of this now. And if I grab the directional light and go to inspector, we can actually rotate this light round the Y. So I'm actually going to do this. So we've got a little bit more light coming into these windows here. Now I can't really visualize it very well because it's coming through the back face of these walls. So what I could do is actually go and open up my room, grab, what is it called? Room. There we go. Room. And if I open up, I think it's in lighting, yeah. You can see we've got cast shadows. It's on. Now you can turn these off so there's no shadows. On, that's fine, but then we've got this two-sided here, and that'll give us a better idea of what's going on. Now you can see that everything is not good in the land, because where this seam is up here, we can see that light is getting through it. Now, there's a good reason for that. If we go to our directional light, and if this wasn't set to baked, it was set to real-time or mixed, you could use these quality settings to hone this in. You can see we've got this thing here called bias, which we can play with, which actually helps. I'm going to undo that. But what's causing this is something called normal bias. And if we grab this and bring it down, we can see that that's slowly disappearing. I've got it actually set to 0 now, but when you set these to 0, you may start getting an effect called shadow acne. So that's something to bear in mind. I'm actually going to undo what I just did there, and I'm going to change this back to a baked light, even though it hasn't been baked yet, because I'm just trying to get an idea of where our light's coming in. So I'm going to go back and select directional light and start turning it again. Okay, that looks pretty good. We've got both windows shining into the room. I'm also going to tilt this on the X as well, this way, so the light gets drawn further into the room. Something you'll notice about the sky as well, if I look at the sky as I tilt on the X, the sun position moves, and as we get closer to the horizon, the colour of the sky changes, orangey red, and then to night. So I don't want to go too far. Something like this. So it's maybe afternoon, something like that. Great, so we've got lots of light spilling into the room now. I'm just going to get back in here. Again, just make sure what we had before. The directional light itself, its mode is set to baked, and in lighting, we've got baked indirect. And I'm just going to generate lighting again, and I'll see you in a sec. Okay, our bake's finished. And this is what it looks like. And you'll notice when we look out this window, we can see through the back face of this and we're getting, you know, we're seeing inside our actual building there. We'll take a look at that in a minute, because there's actually going to be, I'm going to use our shadow caster that I showed you earlier, and not only will that block us from being able to see in there, but it'll actually solve another problem that we're going to come across in a little bit. First things first though, you can see that this part of the room is quite dark, and it may be because of my materials, and this is something that I didn't talk about actually. If you open up the material folder here, and I'm going to choose this fish one, and that's actually in regards to this picture here, this fish picture, and just check the albedo. You can see that we've got this texture, this fish texture here. And I think we can see it if we drag this up. Yeah, so we've got this fish texture, which is in our fish material, but I just want to go into our albedo color and make sure that it's actually white, because when you create a material in Cinema 4D, let's go back to it and create a new material and open it up, and you can see that it's not quite white here. And if we loaded a texture into this slot, in fact we can just generate one, can't we? We can I don't know, surfaces, let's say checkerboard, that's fine. Then this overrides this color, and that's fine. So it doesn't matter if I put this to black or white, because there's something in this slot, this is ignored. Now when you export to Unity, this isn't quite the case. I'm just going to delete this material and go back to Unity. If this color is, say, half grey, you can see that it's actually tinted our picture. If I put this to red, it actually tints our picture red. That's actually quite a nice effect, that. But you can see that this texture does not override this colour. So it's always important this colour is white to get an accurate representation of this texture. So in Cinema 4D, if I choose my floor, it's really important that in the colour channel here, where I've got my texture, that this is 100% white, because it will take that information when it goes into Unity. So I'm just going to make sure my fish, that's fine, the glasses doesn't matter, the light, I think this is white, yeah, it's 100% white, but like I said, we've got to make sure that this isn't grey. Now you'll see this pink material, and this is actually on our pink box here at the bottom, that obviously this is pink, but there's nothing in the albedo texture slot. We want this to be pink, that's its colour. And the same for the red. The Starry Night is a picture, but that's set to white, so we're all good there. And then obviously we've got the teal for this box up here, and the walls. The walls are just a white material, and you can see that we can change that. And then we've got white, which is also white. So everything's as should be. So that's just something to look out for. The bottom of this room is pretty dark. Let's move on to the next thing. The bottom of this room is pretty dark. I'm still not 100% happy about my lighting, actually, how it's hitting the walls and whatnot. And so, in fact, I'm just going to tweak that again really, really quickly. So I'm going to clear my lighting data. There we go. We're getting shadows for some reason. Oh, it's because this room is still, go to inspector, it's still got its shadow set to two-sided. Now I'm going to leave it on that for the minute while I adjust my lighting a little bit. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to say something like that. Oh, that'll do for now. I'm not going to mess around too much. Room 2, I'm going to take this two-sided off and put it to 1, just so it's generating shadows. And I could bake again, but you know what that looks like already. So we know that when we bake, this half of the room is pretty dark. Now this is why I've made this little inset here, because I'm going to put an area light there. So what I'm going to do is go to create, go to light, area light, and it's created this area light here. I'm just going to drag it up and put it under my directional light for now, just to keep it out of the way. And I'm going to zoom in on it. And it's all the way over here. So with it selected, I'm just going to go to its position coordinates and zero these out. 0, 0, 0. Lovely. And now it's in the middle of our floor here. And I'm going to raise it up and put it in this little recess that we've got up here. Now, I actually can't see that recess too well from this, from up above, because, you know, it's a back face. So I'm going to look at it from underneath. And using this little sort of gizmo, axis gizmo at the top here, if we click on this, it will shoot to this side. If I click on it again, it will shoot to the underneath. And if I click on the center of it, it actually toggles between perspective view or on an isometric view. So we can do that, but now we can see that we actually can't see that little recess. So what I'm actually going to do is actually bake the scene again. So I'll cut this out. See you in a sec. Okay guys, I actually didn't let the light map finish baking. I just press generate like this. It starts generating the light map, as we can see. And then I press the cancel button, so it just sort of stops where it is, kind of thing. And it's just so I could bake the lighting into this part here, really. So what I'm going to do is press this and then go underneath, so then we can see this, and actually move my area light to here. And now I can use these little handles that you can see on the edge of the area light to actually size it. So I'm just going to put it there. Drag this handle out so it sort of covers the inside of this. There we go. And come out of this view and shoot round here. And now I obviously need to lift it up. So I'm going to go into this view here and this side view. And then I can, in an orthographic view, so I can actually just sort of put it up in there like this. Okay, great. So it's actually in there now, pointing down. Obviously you don't want to push it too far, or else it'll be on the back side of this. So it's important to make sure that it's not gone too far up. It's actually sort of sat in that little recess. So everything's good. Also, if I click on the area light and go to the inspector to see its properties, you can see its intensity here. I'm going to actually turn its intensity from 1 to 1.5, so it pushes a little bit more light into the room. And I'm going to bake again, and we should get a change almost immediately down that end of the room. There we go. You can see that really brightened up sort of that area now. And as we go round, we can bake all this. Okay, so I'm going to leave that and I'll get back to you guys in a minute. Okay, so the light mapping's finished. As you can see, it's a lot brighter down that end of the room now. So we're looking a little better now. Although our wall material doesn't seem to have our bricks on it anymore, which is a little worrying. So let's have a look at this. Okay, yeah, we've still got our walls on, and it's still got the normal. But because we're not using a directional light map, maybe that is the reason why. But I'm going to actually sort out our materials a little bit now. So let's just go through these. Let's have a look at this little red box. I'm going to make this more shiny. So I'm actually going to put its smoothness up. If I put it right up, you'll see that what's actually in the reflection is the outside. So let's have a look at the outside. You can see the horizon and the sky, and you've got the sun there. And that's exactly what we're seeing in this box. And we're not seeing the room. Now, there's a good reason for that. We need to set up some reflection probes in our room. So that's going to be the next thing that I do. Also, even though this area light is crapping photons into the scene, it doesn't look like a light. And if you notice, if I go back to my C4D file and actually have a look at this, I set that up as a separate material. So we're going to sort that out too. So let's go back. In fact, let's do that first. Let's grab our room and have a look at the materials in it. We've got walls, light, and all the rest of it. Light is the one we're interested in. And if we twirl this down, we can see that the colour's white. But what I'm going to do is turn on this emission. Turn on the emission. It's going to ask for a colour, so I'm going to change this to white. And as you can see now, it actually looks like it's glowing and it's actually emitting light. I think that may be a little too bright, maybe. So we can actually grab this colour and just drag it down to grey. There we go. And it makes it darker. So maybe something like this. So it's kind of like a soft light. Okay, that'll do us for now. As you can see, the global illumination, it says global illumination baked. Now what that means is if you've got a texture in your emission channel or a colour and emission's turned on and this is set to baked, it will actually contribute to the global illumination. So if I was to go back to the lighting tab now and press generate lighting, in fact I might do that in a sec. Let's grab our area light and go back to inspector, and this little checkbox at the top left will actually turn the area light off. We'll go back to our room and back to our material. Yeah, so if this has got, if the emission is turned on and it's got a colour or a texture and this is set to baked, it will contribute to the lighting. So let's generate lighting again and see what happens. There's not much going on there, so I'm going to stop this, go back to the inspector and look at our material, and you can put this up to white here, but you can actually turn the intensity up as well. So you can actually do values over 1. So if I was to grab this and put it up here, and I think you can turn that to 1, or is this 0? Let's have a look. I don't know what it was on normally, but okay, so we got -1, +1, +2. I think this is normally set to 0. But I'm gonna actually turn this intensity up to 5. Okay. Close that. And generate lighting. There we go. Yeah, that did it. So you can see that that's actually contributing to the bake now. If I go back to inspector and go to our HDR and put this back down to 0 maybe, and then bake again, I think that's back to normal 0. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's still generating light, but just not as much as it was. And I can actually change this on the fly. So if I change it now to say 1, there we go. Its intensity's gone up and it's actually contributing to the room. So I just wanted to show you guys that. I don't actually want this, so I'm going to go back to the lighting tab and cancel. I want our area light to be doing all the work, so I'm going to go back to the area light now and turn it back on. Click, so you can see this coloured cube is back on. When it's off, it's grey. So I'm going to turn the area light back on. Then I'm going to go back to the room and back to this material here, and yeah, I'm going to change this back down to 0 and keep it at this kind of colour, I think. Yeah, something like that will be fine. But where it says global illumination baked, I'm going to change this to real time. This way the emission will not be included in our bake as far as I'm aware. So let's go back to the area light actually and turn that off. I just want to make sure that this is not contributing anything to the scene, and by the looks of things it's not. And let's go back to the room and change this to baked. Yeah, and as you can see it got brighter. Yeah, so that's fine. So let's change it back to real time. I'm quite happy with the luminosity of that. So even though it's luminant, it's not actually crapping any photons or rays into the scene. So let's go back to our area light and let the area light do that for us instead. Yeah, that's fine. I find the results with an area light are a lot more cleaner than they are with using emission. It's just a personal preference for me. You know, take it or leave it. So that's baking, and I'm going to let that finish. Okay, we're back and the bake's finished. All's looking rather well, apart from we've still got this issue here. I think this might be a bug in Unity, I'm not sure, but let's carry on regardless. Okay, so this half of the room's lit well. Let's go back to this box, and I'm actually going to, there's a metallic value in the material. I'm going to turn that right up so it becomes really shiny, and I suppose I can turn that to red. So as you can see, the reflection that we're getting in this is the outside. And there's a good reason for that. I'm just going to undo those changes I made. So we're back to red and back to not metallic. The reason for this is Unity produces a kind of like a global light probe. And if we go to lighting and twirl down our environment, we can see that the skybox is, you know, the default skybox, which is this. And environment lighting, yeah, is the skybox. So environment lighting is basically ambient light. It's taken from this skybox. Environment reflections, again, is the skybox. So this default skybox is the source for ambient lighting and environment reflections. Now we can actually override that in a volume with what's called a reflection probe. So let's do that. Let's set up a reflection probe, or several. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a empty game object. I'm going to put this under my directional or area light. It doesn't really matter where. And I'm going to rename that, and you do that by just clicking on it and then clicking on it once. And I'm going to call this ref probes. This is just basically a placeholder for me to put my reflection probes. And I'm also going to make sure it's in the center of the world. So in the inspector with the ref probes selected, I'm going to zero this out in its position. So it's in the middle there. And I'm actually going to create a reflection probe now. So you go to create, light, and it's quite fitting that the reflection probe is in light because it produces ambient light. So click on that and we get this object here. So what I'm going to do is actually zero out this object. So it's in the middle of our world, and luckily it's actually in the middle of our room as well. So I'm actually going to go into this view here and orthographic, and then I can make sure that it's actually smack bang in the middle of this room. And the reason that I'm doing this is because we're actually going to make this box projected. And the reason I'm going to make a box projected reflection probe is because this room is basically a box, or an oblong, should I say. So I'm going to go to this view and orthographic just to make sure that it's actually in the middle. And that looks pretty central to me. So central vertically and central side to side. And then with the reflection probe selected, in fact, let's put that in our ref probe object. That's what I made it for. There we go. So it's in this now. With that selected, I'm going to go over to its attributes, which you can see here. Let's just drag this down so we can see all of it. There we go. The type is set to baked. That's what we want to do. You can have a real-time reflection probe, but that is very, very resource heavy. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it on baked. We've got its importance. We don't need to worry about that. That's if you've got reflection probe volumes that are kind of intersecting. You can say which probe is more important than the other. We've got the intensity of it. One is fine. We've got box projection. I'm going to leave that off for now, but we are going to be using that. And then underneath there, we've got resolution and is it HDR? I want that on. That's on by default. That stands for high dynamic range. We want that for our reflection probes. But the resolution 128, I think that's a little bit low, so I'm going to bump it up to 256. And yeah, everything's great there. Now, we've got these two buttons at the top. This one allows you, well, let's just press it. It allows us to edit the bounding box. So basically anything inside this box will be affected by this probe. Now, if we look at our red box here, you can see that it's taken its reflection from the global internal sky. But if it's inside the bounds of this volume, you can see that the reflection changes. Now it actually comes up as nothing because we actually haven't baked the reflection probe yet. So let's sort out our bounds first. So we want this just outside our room here. And then we can do that with the bottom as well. I'm going to grab this little handle and drag this up. So it's just below the floor. Like so. And we're going to do the same for the top as well. We can drag that all the way down. So it's above our ceiling there. And we're going to do it for here. But we're actually going to overshoot our room a little bit because we want this glass to receive the reflection as well, which I think it will do anyway, but let's just put that there. Okay, now we're going to spin around. So click this. and we're actually going to edit these sides of the bounding box so they're just outside of this room. But again, we've got a window here, so maybe overshoot just a little bit. I can't see my handle now. There it is. There we go. And the same the other side. We're going to put it there, and that should do us for now. Yep, so let's shoot back into the room. And I just wanted to have a look at our box here. I'm going to come out of this by pressing the button again. And we're going to bake this probe now. So with the probe selected, we can see that we've got this bake at the bottom. So let's bake it. And now you can see that our cube is actually receiving reflections from inside the room. Now we can make these reflections even more accurate. Because we set the bounding box like we did, we can actually select the reflection probe and box project it, because it will actually project it onto the bounds of our volume, if you like. So let's have a look at this cube while we do it. Click on box projection, boom. Okay, so we're getting a result like this now. Great. So now that we've got a reflection probe in there, we can unselect that. And you'll notice these icons that represent all these things are quite big. So if we go up to gizmos and 3D icons, we can just shrink those down. There we go. We don't really need to see them. And I've just noticed that we've got a main camera in our scene floating off there. We don't actually need that. So let's get rid of that. Okay. So let's sort out our other materials. We've got this teal here. In fact, this red box, I think it doesn't need to be fully smooth. I think a value of 0.85 could be good, or even 9. We want it kind of shiny but not too mental. Select our teal box and we can do this, the same for that, 0.9 for the smoothness. And let's do that for our pink box as well. 0.9. Okay, great. And what about our wooden floor? Let's make that a little bit shinier, shall we? So if we select the floor, which will select this room object, we can see that we've got the wood floor planks. If we go into there, we can actually crank its smoothness up. And if you crank it up all the way, you can see that that is now taking on some of the characteristics of, well, it's taken on the reflection generated by this light probe, reflection probe here, sorry. It's not quite right, but let's see if we can sort this out. So let's have a look. The smoothness is on 1 now. I think that's a little bit too high, maybe something like 0.9. Yeah, so we get some blurred out reflections there. Reflection probe. Yeah, box projected. Yeah, baked. It's all good. Yeah, seems good. These seem a little inaccurate, these reflections here, but we're going to sort those out, so don't worry about that. And we're kind of getting a result now. The walls as well. Let's choose the walls. Let's pick them. And that'll be the walls material. So you can see that it's just a colour with a normal map in it. Now if I crank the smoothness up, we can actually see the normal now because it's receiving some light. So I think that 1 is a little bit extreme, so maybe something like 0.8 or 0.7 maybe. That could be good. Yeah, we're actually getting some of that specular off those bricks now. It's not so flat. Maybe 0.6, something not too mad. Let's go 0.5. That'll do us. Okay, this glass as well. Let's choose this glass material. And we've got it set to transparent. Again, let's whack the smoothness up. This can be all the way up the top, I think, this glass. And as you can see now, we're getting reflections from that reflection probe that we just baked. And in this glass, we're getting there, there, and there. That's great. Okay, and these should be getting some of... Oh no, there's nothing in that, and there'll be nothing in these for the time being either. Okay, any more materials? I don't think we really need to worry about too much. This white material here, I think that would be okay with a smoothness of 0.5, something like that. Yeah, okay. So we're getting there now. Our floors, you know, it's not the best materials in the world, but this is more about the lighting itself. And yeah, we've got some light up here as well. Now you'll notice that the reflections in this lot down here, they don't look too hot. And again, it's because it's getting its reflections from the sky outside. And you can see in the window, we're not really getting a reflection of this wall or anything like that. So we're going to need to set up a reflection probe there too. So what I'm going to do is actually create a couple more reflection probes. So I'm going to select this reflection probe here and actually duplicate it. So you can Control C, Control C, Control V, and it will call it reflection probe 1. And I'm actually going to move this to here. And just like before, I'm going to go into this view and set this reflection probe up just in this little bit here. So somewhere like that. It's in the middle vertically. And again, I'm going to select the bounds. We don't need to worry about vertical, or maybe for the window up a little bit, I don't know. And then just drag this in here. And I'm just going to select the other probe to see where that ends, actually, that one. Yeah, so somewhere like this. That should do us. Scoot round to the other side as well, using our little gimbal at the top. And you can see that it's way too wide because it's the side of the room, but we're actually just doing this little bit. In fact, maybe from the top would be better. There we go. So just pull that in there. Drag that in there. Bob's your uncle, that'll do. So now we've got this as well. So we can bake that. Pop. So now everything in this little bit should be receiving stuff from that. Yeah, we can see that the ambient colour in there is a lot better as well. So again, I'm going to select one of our reflection probes. This one will do. Control C, Control V, and I'm going to drag it over here. And again, I'm going to go into our orthographic view. And there we go. I might go to the top actually. There we go. And then I can drag this here, just sort of put it in the middle. Change our bounding so it fits along there. Oh, I missed that. Do that again. Grab this handle, bring it in. And I think you get the idea now. I want that glass in there. Okay, just outside the room there. Go back to the other view. Yeah, it's all fine and dandy that way and that way. Yeah, okay, good. So now we can bake this as well. Although the top, oh yeah, the top, I forgot about the top. So let's go to this view, orthographic. Let's grab the bounding for the top and just drag it down. I want to include that glass, so let's do that. That's fine. And now we can bake this probe as well. So let's have a look at the floor there and just see how that changes. Bake, bake, bake. Okay, so now we can see the reflection of the picture in that as well. Okay, good. Now you may see that, you know, we've got our window reflected in the floor there and it doesn't look too practical, doesn't look too hot. And I'm going to select all three reflection probes and just actually bring down the blend distance because, where is it? Box projection, yeah. We actually haven't got a blend distance and there's a good reason for that, and it's because of the rendering mode that I'm in. And I'll come to that in a second. So all in all, we got that pretty set up pretty good. We're doing all right. You know, everything's visible. So let's set this up so we can actually have a little walk around it and see what it looks like. So what you're going to need to do is you are going to need to go to up here you've got assets, import package, and then you've got these packages that come sort of installed with Unity. One of them's characters, so let's grab characters. We'll bring up this little dialog. Everything should be selected anyway, but you can press all and import. I'll have a good old think about compiling scripts and a load of other whatnot. Okay, so now that that's finished, we've got this folder in here called standard assets, and if we open that up, you can see there's a folder called characters. If we open that up, we've got first person character, which is what I want. Open that, and then we've got prefabs, and this is where you want to go. And we've got this FPS controller, so I'm going to drag that into our scene, and it generates this. It's a little fella. So he's zeroed out in the world, but if we go to this view again, oh no, not that, this view, orthographic, we can see that he's sort of going through the floor, and if you press F, that'll frame him. There you go. So we can drag that up so he's above the floor, and then we can go back into this view, and you can see that he's got a camera attached to him, and he's facing up the stairs. In fact, if you go to your game view, you can see what the player controller is seeing. If you've got another camera in the scene, that's not good. Get rid of it. You only want one that's active anyway. So we got this thing in there. Let's press play then and see what happens. In fact, I'm going to go to the game window, and there's a little button that says maximize on play. So basically it will just make the game screen as big as it can. Okay, so let's hit play. Opens up the game window. I fall straight through the floor, look up and see the room travelling away from me. So I'm going to press escape so I can actually stop this. And the reason for that is there's no collision on the floor. A lot like Cinema 4D, you need a collision sort of tag, if you like. Whereas in this, it's called a component. So let's select our room. So make sure the room's selected and fold up our materials. You can fold that up for now as well. And we've got this button, add component. If I click that, and it's already there, and you've got this long list of stuff, let's just type in mesh, and that basically will find something called a mesh collider. So let's add that, and you can see it's added a mesh collider to our stack of stuff now. So let's hit play again. Oh, we've got a bit of noise. We didn't fall through the floor. I'm able to look around and walk, and we got some really annoying sounds going on there. So what I'm going to do is click on my FPS controller, and we've got a load of scripts and stuff attached to this object. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the footstep sounds here, and size is how many fields we've got. I'm going to put 0. So now we've got no footstep sounds. Jump sound and land sound, I'm going to get rid of them as well. So you can just do that by clicking on this end tab here and then choosing none. So now there's no noise, so hopefully it won't be annoying for you guys. Okay, so we've got no noise now, brilliant. I think the spacebar jumps, yeah. Okay, so we can look around now. Okay, it's not too bad. Let's have a look what happens when we go up the stairs. Yeah, we get stuck, and it's because of our collision mesh, our collision object. So let's stop that. Select our FPS controller, and this is the collider capsule we've got here. So I'm actually going to go over, select it, go over here, character controller, and we've got a radius. I'm going to actually shrink this down to, I don't know, 1.5, yeah, 0.15 actually. So we've got a thin kind of fella. And in terms of its tallness as well, if I press play, in fact, let's go to a view like this and like this. If I press play and then press escape and go back to our scene view, which it doesn't allow me to do for some reason. Okay, let's go to game, take off this maximize on play, go back to our scene, press play, escape, go back to scene. Okay, you can see that he's actually hovering off the floor a little bit, even though he should be stood on it, and it's probably because of this skin width here. So if I actually bring this down to 0.0, instead of it being 8, bring it down to 0.02 and do that, and then try it again. Oh, sorry. That's something else you should remember. When you press play, any changes you make here, when you stop, they'll all get reverted. So make sure you do this kind of changes when the game is not playing. Okay, so 0.25, something like that. Let's press play now. and he should be sat a lot closer to the floor. Now you shouldn't mess around with the skin width too much, because if you go to values that are too low, you might find that you're getting stuck in walls and that kind of thing. If you are, it's because of this skin width and you need to put it up. Okay, so what about the height? I think I'm going to adjust that as well, because even though the capsule is encapsulating the camera here, let's put it down to like 1.6. Okay, it's made the capsule smaller, and if I grab the whole FPS controller and move it down, you can see that the camera is no longer in the capsule, it's kind of sat on it. So let's press play. Okay, that's not too bad. In fact, that's a bit more... There we go, and we can actually get up the stairs now. There's something going on here with the reflection probe, I'm not quite sure what. But we'll check that out in a sec. Okay, but at least we can move around now. And you'll see that when we go right up to a wall, we can actually see through it, which is no good. So let's fix that. Okay. The reason that the camera can see through the wall, and it appears that we're getting... Let's have a look at our probes. Oh, our probes are rendering the outside for some reason. That's very strange. That one retained. Let's have a look at this one up here. Again, this could be a bug, I'm not sure. No, that one retained, but doesn't appear to actually be... Okay, so maybe I'll clear my lighting data and rebake the scene. That should do it. That's something you should note as well. If you go to lighting, go to generate lighting and use this drop down, you've got this bake reflection probes thing there. There we go. We've got our correct probes now. Yeah, that looks a lot better. It doesn't look... I thought something looked dodgy. Okay. So back to our FPS controller. But there was something else I was going to show you. What was it? Let me just have a think. Ah, yeah. We can actually mix these pre-baked reflections. These pre-baked reflections are really, really good for... Okay, say I look in this red cube. I can see the windows being reflected behind me. So those windows there. These reflection probes are really, really good for that. But they're not so hot on reflections for stuff that isn't marked as a reflection object. So now's the time to bring in our animated sphere, and then I can show you the problems associated with having a dynamic object. Everything in this room, the paintings, the walls, everything in here is being marked as lightmap static, so they get baked into our scene here. Because Unity knows that they're not going to be moving. But what if we've got a moving object? Let me just shut up and actually get on with it and show you what I mean. So if we go back to our scene here, I'll fold up my room. In fact, while we're here, I just want to make sure there's nothing wrong with that windowsill. It doesn't appear to be. No, should be fine. Okay, obviously got a little error in Unity there. So let's export our animated sphere. I'm going to grab it, File, Export, FBX. Going to go to our imports folder, and then I'm going to name this animated sphere. Oh, if I could spell. There we go. Save. Export settings. Everything's great. We want to make sure we've got tracks on so it actually takes the animation. And that should be exported. Go back to Unity. It recognises it. We've got this animated sphere here. Now we don't need to generate lightmap UVs because it's not going to be light mapped, because it's not going to be static. It's animated. It's going to be moving around. But we do need to go to materials and change this to use external materials, legacy, apply. And now you can see that it takes on this red material because I think it shared that material anyway. Okay, then we go to animation. And actually, let's go to rig first. It's set to generic, which is kind of the new correct way of doing it, but I'm going to change it to legacy just because it plays, it animates on play. And if we go to the animation tab now, I can actually make it loop as well. So where it says wrap mode down the bottom here, I'm actually going to change this to loop and apply it. And Now we can drag this, let's just close this up. We can drag the animated sphere into the scene. And if we look around here, there it is in the corner. Now you'll notice a few things about this. It doesn't have a reflection on the floor. In fact, if I choose the floor and choose the wooden planks and crank this right up, you can see that it's not being reflected in the floor at all, which is no good. You'll also notice that it doesn't have a shadow either. So if it was in this light, it won't have a shadow. And in fact, I can demonstrate that by creating another object, a Unity object, a cube. I'm just going to zero this out and actually cut its size down by half. There we go. So this is a dynamic object just like this sphere. So you'll notice that not only does it not have a reflection in the floor, it doesn't cast a shadow either. And that's because of how we've got our scene set up. So let's address both these things. In fact, I'm going to leave that cube there for the time being. And I'm going to actually put my wood reflection back down because that looks awful. So let's change that to 0.8 or whatever it was. What was it, 0.9? Yeah, that'll do, 0.9. And let's sort out the fact that dynamic objects don't actually receive any shadows. Okay, let's click on our directional light. It's because our directional light is baked. What this wants to be is mixed. So it's a mixture of baked and real time. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell does that mean? Well, if this light's set to baked, it means all of its shadows and its light is baked. But if it's set to mixed, it means that its light is actually baked onto static objects, but not onto dynamic objects. We want to change this to mixed. And what's the shadow type? Yeah, let's stick to soft shadows. That should be good enough. The resolution, it says use quality settings. I don't know what those quality settings are. So let's actually go check them out. If we go to edit, I think it's in quality. We'll see here hard and soft shadows, and it's a high resolution stable fit, and this is actually set to very high at the moment. I'm just put it to ultra. That should be fine. But yeah, these are high resolution soft shadows, and we've got a shadow distance of 150, which is overkill because we're only operating within this distance. So let's find out how big this distance is. Let's create a cube, and that's 1 by 1 by 1. So let's actually stretch this out. Oh, we'll probably zero it out as well, that'd help. Okay, so its distance in terms of the length of the room there is, okay, about 8 meters. What about the other way? Let's stretch it out in the Z. So that's a little bit of overkill, but even that's 12 meters. So we don't need any more than 12 meter shadow distance. Now, you're probably thinking, who cares? Who cares if it's 12 meters or 150 meters? Does it really matter? It actually does. Because if we go back to that setting, edit, project settings, quality, the larger this distance, the shitter the shadow quality gets. But if you bring this distance down to say, what did we say, 12 meters? Something like that. The real-time shadow quality actually improves because it doesn't have to deal with spreading shadows out over a large distance. So it means the shadows closer can be better quality. That's the long and short of it anyway. So I'm actually going to put the shadow distance down to 12 just to make sure, maybe 13, something like that. So yeah, that's fine. If we go back to our directional light now, it says use quality settings. We've just set the quality settings in quality, so we should be absolutely fine in that regard. Okay, yeah, we should be fine. So what I'm going to do now is actually rebake the scene because I've changed the nature of our light now. So I'm going to fold this up, go back to our lighting window, and we've still got this set to baked indirect. And it says here, mixed lights provide real-time direct lighting, while indirect light is baked into light maps and light probes. Okay, that sounds good to me. Let's generate the light map. This is what I wanted to show. Now that we've set that directional light to mixed, we've got the problem where we've got baked light, fine, that's been baked into, you know, the walls and all of that malarkey. But the real-time aspect of that light is not hitting the back face of polygons and terminating. It's just moving through them. And that is exactly why I created this object here called Room Shadow Caster. So let's unhide this. So really it's a blocker. So let's export this as its own FBX. And the reason you're probably thinking, why do you just include it as part of the room? Because if we go back to Unity, the reason that I didn't include it as part of this room model is because all of this geometry that we've got on the outside would have to be included in the light map. So if we go back to Unity and go to Light in Global Maps and look at this, we've got all this real estate for our room inside. We're never going to see the outside, so we don't want the outside aspect of that taking up loads of room on the light map when it's completely unnecessary. So that's why I made it a separate object. So let's go back to this, choose our Room Shadow Caster, File, Export, FBX, go to our imports. I'm actually going to call this Room Shadow Caster just to keep things tidy. We can save that. It'll ask for export settings, and I'm just going to say yes to this. That's fine. Go back to Unity. It'll have a think quick, and now we've got this thing called Room Shadow Caster. So let's go to the inspector, go to the model. We don't need to generate lightmap UVs because we're not going to mark this as static. We do not want this to be included in a light map. There's no point. We just need it to block our shadows. What else do we need to do? Materials. I think it's got the white material on it. So let's do what we did before just for the sake of it. And now we can drag this into our scene. And there we go. It's in our scene. And if we go inside now, it's actually generating shadows. Now you'll see here we've got a little bit of an error there and a little bit of an error on the corner. So we actually need to dial in our shadow settings slightly. And you can see now this box has got a shadow, and that's because our directional light is now mixed. It's shitting out, you know, baked lighting data and real-time lighting data for objects that are dynamic. We didn't let the bake finish, that's why we're getting all this crap here. But let's sort out some of these issues here, like this and this. So let's go to our directional light and let's have a look at these bias settings. So the normal bias is 0.4, that can come down. Let's try 2. We're still getting an issue there. 0.2, 0.5. Okay, 0.5 is a bit too big because we're still getting the problem. 3, no, 4. Yeah, we're getting it at 4, but not at 3. So 0.03 seems to be a magic number there, and it's sorted out our issue there and there. Yeah, that looks actually okay. What about the fact that the light is leaking through? That might be a baked issue. I might come back to that in a minute just to make sure. Okay, so now we've got our light sorted out and we've got a shadow blocker there. Let's bake the scene again. Let's go to lighting, the scene tab, and generate lighting. Okay, the bake's finished, and yet again it appears that our reflection probes didn't bake properly. It seems to be a bug. So let's go back to lighting, go here, bake reflection probes. And it still didn't bake properly. Although that, maybe it did. I'm just going a bit mad. Okay, let's go back to this. It's definitely box projected. I'll come back to that in a minute. I said that earlier. There's something else we can do here. Oh, it still appears. Are we getting a problem with that shadow bias? Yeah, we are when we're zoomed out a little bit. Let's go back to our directional light. Let's see if we can hone this in a little bit more. Let's bring this down to maybe 0.02. Yeah, that appears to have fixed it. Maybe that bias needs to come down a little bit as well. Although I'm reluctant to mess with that, because that is the thing that causes shadow acne. And we're getting all kinds of weird reflections going on here as well, by the looks of things. Yeah, it's almost like in the reflections they're not seeing that our light blocker is on the outside, which is very, very strange. Ah, I know why. I'm an idiot. Basically, this thing on the outside here is generating shadows, but so if I select the thing on the outside here, and we can see that it's not being marked as static, that's good. We don't want it marked as lightmap static, but we need it to be reflection probe static. We still need the reflection probes to see it. So let's mark the shadow caster as static, and then drop down here and untick lightmap static. And now, hopefully, when we go down here, drop this down and say bake all reflection probes, they'll give it a good bake. And now they can see that that wall is blocking. So now our reflections look proper. It's just that these couldn't see this outside wall, and that was the issue there. So we've fixed that out. It wasn't an error. That's good. That's good for us. Okay, so I think we're almost there. We've got shadows for dynamic objects now. So if I grab this box and move it around, it gets shadowed when it's in direct light. So that's great. Let's delete this cube. Now we've got we've got something else that's troubling, and that's the fact that this, even though it receives reflections, and if we zoom in we can see the reflection of the room in it, it doesn't actually make reflections on the floor. Now there is a way you can actually get reflections on the floor for dynamic objects, and that is by using a kind of real-time reflection method. Now you'd be saying, well, why would you want to use two methods? Well, screen space reflection is what I'm talking about. And the good thing about screen space reflection is that it works in the confines of the screen. So if I had this view, that's great. It would work here and it would show the reflection of this ball on the floor. But if we look in this ball, because it's screen space, it wouldn't be able to reflect anything behind the camera. So that's why this method, using the probes, is very, very good for that kind of thing. So we're going to use a combination of both. We're actually going to use reflection probes and screen space reflections. Reflection probes are very, very cheap in terms of cost, you know, to the system resources. Screen space reflections are a little bit more intensive. Well, not just a little bit, a lot more intensive. But if you've got a good rig, you can put those in your setup. So that's what I'm going to do now. So what do we need to do? Well, we actually need to go to the asset store. So I'm going to open the window, asset store. It'll open up this, and I'm already signed in, so that's fine. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to type post processing stack. There we go, Unity Technologies. And it will look like this. It's called the post processing stack. It's made by Unity Technologies, and it's free, which is what we like to hear. And if you have a look at some of the images here, you can do tone mapping. You can, there we go. We've got some screen space reflections. We've got bloom. It does all kinds of stuff. So it's worth looking at. So I'm just going to import this. Should get this thing come up saying decompressing. It'll bring up this little dialog here. All should be selected anyway, so you just need to hit import. And it brings this in. It says the project contains scripts or assemblies that are obsolete APIs, so you can go ahead and Unity will automatically upgrade the scripts. Sometimes it might mess up. That's why it suggests making a backup. I know it works, I don't really care, so just click I made a backup, go ahead. Okay, so that's imported in. I'm going to get rid of the asset store tab, close tab. We're back in our scene, and now you'll see that we've got a folder in here called post-processing. Okay, we don't have to look through that, it's fine. So what we want to do is click on our FPS controller. I'm going to press F so we can see it. And we're going to actually twirl this down, and then we've got this first-person character. And if we click on that and go to our inspector, you'll see this is where our camera is. So we can add a component now, and I'm going to type post, and it should bring up the post-processing behavior. And if I click on that, it'll add this post-processing behavior, and it's looking for a post-processing profile. And it says none in there for the time being. So we need to actually create one. So we go to our project folder, create, post-processing profile. You can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to leave it as new post-processing profile. When you click on that, we've got all these options here for, you know, motion blur, bloom, color grading. You can do all that kind of stuff as a post-processing effect. Now I'm just going to go back to my first person character where we put this, and we need to now drag this profile into this slot here. Now, if we go back to this, we can actually set up our screen space reflection. So it's easy as checking it on. If we click on the title, it basically opens up the settings for it, which is great. And this is actually what turns it on and off. So let's have a comparison. Let's click play and have a look. I'm going to turn around and see this ball moving. So now at least we're getting shadows from that ball. But notice as it moves around, it doesn't look very grounded at all. And you can see that when it moved up the stairs there, it had a, look, check out the reflections. And then pop, the reflections popped in and out. So maybe we need a probe on the stairs here. But maybe we can blend our probe. So it goes in there, comes out, blends back in. Pop, that's not very realistic at all. And also it's lighting as well, it doesn't look very realistic. And we're definitely not getting any reflections. So that's what that looks like for the reflections on the floor. For the ball, there are none. So if we go to our post-processing profile, go to screen space reflection and turn this on, you'll notice there's a little warning at the top, and it says this effect only works with the deferred rendering path. Well, let's check what rendering path we're using. If we go to edit, project settings, and go down to graphics, we'll get all these tiers. So this is the lowest tier, this is the standard, the medium tier, and the higher tier. Well, what tier am I actually using? Well, let's establish that first. Project settings, and I think it is in quality. Yes, so I've actually got ultra selected, and you can see it ticked here. So I'd say that's the higher tier, which it most definitely is. So if we go back to project settings and graphics and go down to the higher tier, it says use default. I'm going to uncheck that. And at the bottom here, you can see that the rendering path is forward. We actually want this to be deferred. And now we should get screen space reflections. So let's go back to our post-processing profile. You can see that it's turned on, and already I can see in our viewport now, look, I'm getting reflections of that ball in the floor. Very subtle, but they're definitely there. The quality is low. I'm going to bump this up to high, and already you can see that's good. And the good thing about this is it actually merges with our probe reflections. So I'm just going to twirl this up, and I'm going to choose this probe. In fact, I'm going to choose all our probes. Let's grab all this. And now you can see, now that we're in deferred mode, that this blend distance is actually not grayed out anymore, which is great. Now, this blend distance actually has an effect on the box projection of probes. So you can see the blend distance is 1. I'm actually going to shift it up, and look what happens to the reflection of this window in the floor. It gets further away. It's mad. Okay, but when it's on 0, you can see that they're in the right place. Oh, keep pressing the wrong button. There we go. So you can see that they're actually in the right place. Now this is set to 1 normally, this blend distance. So the blend distance actually means at what distance does one probe blend with another probe. Now if the gap between this probe here and this probe here was 1, they'd start blending together, but it's not. So this was 1 normally, and you can see that it doesn't do great things for our box projection. It's not the end of the world, but I'm going to rein that in a little bit, but I don't want it to be 0. So I'm going to say 0.5. That should be acceptable. And okay, let's give this a play and see what our ball looks like when we give it a look. Okay, so now we can see that this thing's got reflections. It's actually a bit more grounded in the world, which is very, very nice. So it's got shadows, and it's got reflections on the floor, but there's something still not quite right about it, which is a shame. It's lighting. It's not being lit correctly as it's moving through the scene, and also its reflections are right dodgy when it's in this stairwell here. So let's do that. Let's create another reflection probe for that stairwell. So I'm just going to grab one of them. Let's zoom in on it. Oh yeah, and something else I wanted to say as well. It might be difficult to work in your scene. Now we've got this shadow blocker here, this object. It might actually be hard to work in the scene because now it's blocking what you can see. But there's something we can do about that. If we select it and then go to, so we select our shadow caster, we go to the mesh render section in the inspector window, and twirl down lighting. Is it in there? Yeah. It says here, cast shadows is on. We can turn them off, but we don't want that. We still want it to cast shadows. But you can say it's two-sided. We don't want that, but shadows only. So if we check shadows only, it will still cast shadows, but it will just not be visible in the world, if you like. And you can see where our shadow distance is working now. If we get far enough away, you can see our shadows bleed off. But like I said, that's not going to matter. We exist purely inside this zone here. And you can see that we've still got an issue there. So let's choose the shadow caster and just turn it to on. Shadows only. Yeah, that's definitely what we want. Let's go back to our directional light and see if we can bring this normal bias. Yeah, it's the normal biased again. So 0.01. Okay, that seems to be working all right. What about 0.2? Is that what we had before? Yeah, and it's back. It's probably because we changed the lighting mode to deferred, so now we've got to tweak a few things again. And also that has ramifications for our bake as well, because we're in a different rendering mode, and I think that might affect the lighting model. So for the sake of being accurate, I'm going to do another bake, and I'll be back in a minute. See you in a sec. Let's do another bake. Well, I did another bake and it was really, really quick. So obviously there wasn't a problem with the bake itself. Even though I changed from forward to deferred, it was quite happy with that. All the reflection probes are looking nice. So let's get a reflection probe in that stairwell. So let's choose this one up here. It's probably the best candidate, and make a copy of this. Yeah, and it's called it 3. So let's move it to here. Let's get in another view. There we go, orthographic. Let's choose the one above just to see where its bounds end. Okay, I think this is actually going to be all right. So let's do this here. Go to the inspector window and change the bound slightly just so it covers this. Although they should blend anyway. We can bring this down so it's actually in the roof. And yeah, let's drag this all the way down to the bottom. That should be fine, something like that. As long as it covers the steps. It's box projected. I'm not sure if I want that or not, but let's leave it on box projected for the time being. And let's bake it. Okay, so it's baked that. Let's go back in. It's actually the ambient for this section now should be correct. And oh, we can see a little bit of light bleeding here. So again, let's go to our directional light. Let's see if this bias setting does anything for that. Not really. It's probably this normal bias. Yeah, it is the normal bias. I think we're going to have to consider putting another 0 in here. That seems to have fixed it. I'm not sure a value of 0 will cause problems. I'm going to try it. Let's put this right down to 0. That seems to have fixed it. It doesn't look like there's any problems there. Okay, let's check the ball going up these stairs now. So let's press play. Our ball travels along. We've got some reflections. We've got shadows. travels in there, blends to that. Okay, it still looks like it's getting reflections from outside, which is really weird. I'm not sure why. That'll be why. First of all, it's not actually baked, but also the bounds of it, we didn't check this direction. So let's do this, and we could do it from the top actually, and grab its bounds and blast them in this way and this way. Great. Let's bake this. Hopefully it will actually hold on to its reflections this time. Come out of this. Yeah, we're all good again. Let's hit play. Okay, so it's going through there. Yeah, great. It's going up the stairs. It's actually receiving some half decent shadows this time. Reflection. Okay, good. Okay. Well, it's not too bad. Let's check that it's held onto it. Yeah, good, good. I might take that box projection off. We'll see how we go. Okay, so we've got that. That's good. Now the other thing is the lighting. This looks out of place. When we play it, we can see that, yeah, it's moving around, but it doesn't appear to be lit correctly. As it moves from a dark area to a light area, its lighting doesn't appear to change, and it looks pretty almost fluorescent when it's in dark areas, which is not good. So how do we light dynamic objects? Because you couldn't bake its global illumination as it moves through the scene on every frame. That would be way too intensive. So Unity came up with a lovely way of doing this via light probes. Now what light probes are, they're kind of a matrix of points in space that basically sample the light in. So when you bake the scene, they get baked as well, these points. And they take lighting information in all directions. I think they call it some kind of spherical harmonics or something like that. You know, it basically creates a point that takes light from every direction, so it's like a sample. And it basically blends between samples to give dynamic objects sort of like an approximate lighting. So let's do some light probes. Let's do that now. Okay, so I'm actually going to create empty object, and I'm going to call this light probes. And I'm going to move this up under reflection probes, and then I'm going to go to create light and then light probe group, and then I'm going to put that in our light probes. Now as you can see, we've got this kind of thing going on, this little thing with 4 probes. Let's make our gizmos bigger so we can actually see the bloody things. There we go. Okay, that'll do. Hopefully this lot won't get in the way too much. And I'm actually going to zero these out. Let's zero out our actual null. There we go. And then where's our light probe group? There we go, they're there. All right, so how would we go about setting this up? Now, light probes, really, this shadow's a good example. So you'd want this to be darker than this area here. If you had a piece of paper on the floor, you'd want it to be darker here and lighter here. So you'd put a probe there and a probe the other side of the shadow, and it'd blend between them. So that's what you'd normally do. And seeing as this is just moving along the floor in this room, and then moving up the stairs and then along here, you could just put them there. But if you didn't know what dynamic objects you were adding to the scene and where they were going to be, say you put an object that you could pick up and throw into the air, it would you'd need probes to be everywhere. So we're going to make a grid of probes. That's probably the most sort of pragmatic way to do this. So I'm going to move these here. In fact, I'm going to move them into this corner here. And how many do we want? Right, so the way I'd select this is if I grabbed like this, the probes would disappear. So what you've got to do is you've actually got to select one and then you can do this. So you might think that's strange. So I'm just going to move this to this side. So we've got, you know, a sample from both sides of the room. But then we've got this chasm in the middle where it's just going to blend between these probes, and we want a little bit more resolution than that. So with these probes selected, I'm going to go up here and press duplicate selected. So it should duplicate them, and when I move these now, we've got another set of them. So there we go. I'm going to do that there, and then say duplicate selected, and do it again. So now we've got a lovely little grid of clones, of probes even, there. And I just want to make sure that these are evenly spaced, so I'm just going to jig these about a bit. Something like that. I'm not going to be too accurate, but I'm going to make these here so it's a bit more square. And then I'm going to go into this view and make sure that they're actually in the right place vertically as well. So I'm going to grab all of them and move them up to their near the ceiling. Then I'm going to grab these few down here and put them so they're on the floor. Then I'm going to duplicate selected these bottom ones and actually move these up here. So we've got a little bit more of a grid type thing going on. Then I'm going to grab these. In fact, I could grab all of them, can I? And then say duplicate selected, drag them this way. So now we've got a lovely little mesh thing going on there, and that covers about half the room. Let's just grab these three and say duplicate selected, and then move these here like this. And we've got a lovely little grid in this room now. So let's zoom in. We've got a grid of probes. Now we've actually got a probe that is behind this box here. So that's actually going to be sort of like no lighting at all. So what I might do is actually grab this and move it in and up. So we've got like a sample coming from there. Because otherwise it's just going to be black. It's inside a box, you know, that's not going to help anyone. And then maybe move this here. And move it on top of the box maybe. We can also add probes where, you know, we need a little bit more detail or something like that. But I'm not going to worry too much. I don't want to go too mad. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go back into this view here. And I'm actually going to grab these two probes, duplicate selected, and then move them here. And I just want to make sure that I'm not colliding with anything. No, that looks fine. I just wanted to make sure this lip up here I wasn't, you know, grabbing. So now we can go back into our top view. Let's move these there like that. Let's duplicate these again and put them there. I might even duplicate them again. You might not need this many. I mean, this is a little bit overkill, I've got to be honest, but it's a small scene, so we can afford to, you know, do this kind of thing. And now I'm going to do it here as well. I'm going to grab these, I'm going to duplicate selected, and I'm going to move these to here on the stairs. Now again, because the stairs actually elevate, let's see what we got here. Yeah, okay, so they're going through the bottom of the stairs there. We don't want that, so I'm going to go to this view, orthographic, and then we can get a nice clear picture of what's going on. I'm going to grab this lot here and move them up. Grab that and move that down so it's in the middle. Then I'm going to grab all of them and duplicate selected, move them this way. So again, we're halfway up the stairs and we don't want a collide with the stairs there, so I'm going to do that. Grab this one and move it down. Grab this and again move that down so it's inside this. Then I'm going to grab all three again, duplicate selected, move these up. So now we've got one at the top of the stairs there. That's great. Oops, shit. There we go. Move these down so that's there, and move these up so they're kind of in the middle. There. Okay, so that should be pretty good. Yeah, maybe go to a top view just to check these out. I think we could probably move these closer together as well. So if I select these and just boot them there, select these and boot them there. If you're wondering what all these lines are, it's basically the relationships and the blend relationships between all this stuff, basically. Now I can grab these, duplicate, and let's see what I want to do. Okay, I'm going to put 2 there, duplicate selected again, and I'm going to put 2 there. Screw it. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to select these 4, duplicate selected, move them over here. I don't want to take too long doing this, so it's a little bit slapdash, but you know, that will do nicely. All right, cool. Okay, so we've got a grid of probes throughout the scene now. Great. I think we can stop editing these, come out the light group. So now these need to be baked. These need to actually have some probe information baked into them. So we're going to have to do another light bake. But all's good, I think. Yep. So let's get back in the scene. Let's come out of the light probe group. We can turn these gizmos down again because they were massive. Let's go to the lighting tab and generate our lighting. Okay guys, our light probe group should be baked now. I think there might be a way to visualize it if we have a look through here. No, the light probe group is on. Okay, well let's check. That does look different, doesn't it? It looks like it's... Let's test this with a box. Let's create a box. 3D object cube. Yet again. We can see that it's actually receiving probe data. In fact, if we select our sphere here and actually enlarge our 3D icons, you can actually see the probes. So you can see this is the lighting it's taken from this area, and this area, this area, and this area. So basically what's happening is this dynamic object is sampling all these probes here and then making, well actually this probe is a virtual probe. So these are the probes that we made, this one, and this one. And based on these probes, it makes a 4th probe internally, which is basically a mixture of these to light this object. Pretty clever stuff, really. It's good stuff, and you can see that the colors changed. Anyway, back to our cube. That's receiving data as well from the probe, so let's zero this out and check. There we go. You can see that it's not fluorescent white anymore, so it receives real-time lighting data from direct light and everything else from probes. So let's just make this cube a little bit smaller, 0.5 by, wrong button, 0.5, 0.5. Okay, there we go. So as we move through the scene, you can see how this swaps what probes it's using to get data. And as we move into here, you can see the box is actually getting darker. And as we move here, it gets lighter. And if we move here, you can see that it's receiving light from this area light above, but it's not actually, it's actually using these probes to generate this lighting. And as we move away from the area light, it gets darker. But you can see how that's using these probes. So let's get rid of the cube and let's hit play. Let's just check our reflections are good. They look good. They look good. We're all looking good up here. Yeah, great. Okay, so let's just press play and have a look at our little sphere and see if it still looks out of place. That's a lot better. That's definitely a lot better. It gets darker as it moves into there. Doesn't look fluorescent. Moves out of here. Moves up the stairs. Gets darker as it moves up here. Yeah, that's a lot better. I'm really happy with that. That's great. Gets lighter as it moves down here, and it does it all again. That's great. So that's one more thing we can do to make this look grounded. There's something else we can do with the post-processing stack, actually, and let's just make our gizmos tiny again so they're not getting in our way. Let's look down this end of the room. We can actually add screen space ambient occlusion. So let's have a look at that. Let's choose our post-processing profile and then go down to, where are we? Ambient occlusion. So we can open this up. Let's add it. Boom. Now I'd say that's a little bit of overkill there. Just a bit. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit too much. Probably needed something a bit more subtle, but you can see that on our ball it's really helping as well. So let's press play again with that turned on. And you can see that the ball's now got a shadow because it's doing screen space ambient occlusion. It's actually doing it for the ball. So especially as it moves up there, it actually sort of grounds it a little bit more. But I think this is way too heavy as a default setting. And if anything, actually, I'd heavily suggest, there's a guy on the Unity asset store called Sonic Ether, and he made a ambient occlusion post-processing effect which is very, very efficient, let's say. It's very good, and it's a lot more subtle than this one, so I'd be half tempted to use that. But for this case, I'm just going to hone in what we've got in the post-processing stack. So let's do that. Okay, the intensity is at 1 at the moment. Let's do 0.5 and see what happens. Okay, that's a little bit more subtle. That's a little bit better. And we can even rein in the radius a little bit because I think that's a bit too much. So let's 0.2 maybe. That's nothing. 0.2. Yeah, that's a little bit more subtle. And the sample count is medium. Yeah, I think we're quite good with medium actually. It doesn't look too bad. So let's play that. Yes, that's a lot more subtle. So we're getting the reflections, we're getting a bit of ambient occlusion under the ball. We've got our probes working really, really nicely. Oh, we're getting some clipping there. Oh yeah, that's something I didn't sort out. Again, when we walk up to the wall, you can see that it's clipping. So this is a setting on the camera. So let's open up the FPS controller, select the first person camera. In the inspector window, we can see this clipping near and far. Now, a value of 1 is 1 meter. So 0.3 is 30 centimeters. So let's reduce this down to 0.01. That is 1 centimeter. Now let's have a look. Okay, so now if we walk into the corner, brilliant. We're not getting any clipping anymore. We're right up close. That's exactly what we want. Something else you'll notice as well. Look at the anti-aliasing on these stairs. You can see the jagginess going on there, the stepping. And there's a good reason for that. When we switched from forward rendering mode to deferred rendering mode, let's get back in our scene, the default anti-aliasing no longer works. Okay, so let's actually get somewhere where we can see stepping big time. I mean, that's a pretty good example. I wouldn't mind it a little bit more extreme, to be honest. Probably something with a diagonal. No. Yeah, okay, something like that. That'll do, that window there. See a light and dark area. You can see the stepping along this line here. So let's go to Edit, Project Settings and go down to our graphics. It's this setting. When we went to deferred rendering here, we need to go to deferred rendering to be able to use screen space reflection. But the upshot of doing that is that when we go to Edit, Project Settings, is it quality? Yes. It says anti-aliasing here, and I think this is MSAA or whatever they call it. This is actually no longer on, so we might as well disable this. And as you can see, it looks exactly the same. So now our anti-aliasing has to be a post-processing effect. So let's go back to our post-processing profile. I'm going to turn bloom off. I don't really want to mess around too much setting that up. Dithering. There's nothing to configure here. If you're a Cinema 4D user and you're doing renders, you know that dithering's good. Dithering prevents things like banding, that kind of thing. And it's really cheap as well. So let's turn on dithering. You don't have to do anything else with that. but we were talking about anti-aliasing. So here we go, anti-aliasing. Let's turn that on. Let's keep an eye on this edge actually before we turn it on. Watch that as I turn this on. Boom, it's already smoothed it out slightly. So this is on fast approximate anti-aliasing. I'm going to leave it on there actually. It's on the default preset, but I'm going to change that. Look at that stepping again. And we can see that that's dramatically smoothed that out. So let's have a little play now and have a look at the steps. Yep, our steps seem to be a lot better by the looks of things. Ooh, there's a little bit going on there. Okay. Let's make sure that that's in there. Yep, that's good. Post-processing profile. Quality. What about extreme quality? That doesn't seem to be changing it too much. Okay, we've got temporal and... Okay, I'm just going to leave it on that and see what we get. Yeah, it's better. I'm quite happy with that. Yeah, the lighting's good. The ball's moving around pretty good as well. Yeah, it gets darker there. We've got a bit of a reflection underneath. We've got our we've got a little bit of ambient occlusion screen space, and it all seems to be running well still, so that's good. Yeah, all looks good. Now I think because this outside wall has been turned off, no, I think that's still good. Yeah, I think we're getting the correct reflections. Yeah, we're all good. But yeah, in a short amount of time, we've managed to bake a scene. We've managed to get some nice reflections and stuff. We've managed to get some probes, so our dynamic objects look pretty good. Bit of ambient occlusion. It all seems to be running quite well. And we're still getting these errors, though, here on the window, which I'm not happy about. But what I'm going to do now is a final bake. We've got it set up as we want it. And I'm going to go back to the lighting. And it seems that we've got everything working as we want. So I'm going to crack up the direct samples to 64, so that's double. And I'm actually going to double the indirect samples as well to 2 grand. Leave our bouncers on 4. The filtering's okay. The light map resolution is okay. Let's have a look. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty high. Let's actually see what's going on with these errors here. Maybe Unity is not unwrapping this in the best way. Maybe there are overlapping light maps. In fact, we can check if there are or aren't with the UV overlap. Ah, yeah, we're getting some UV overlap here, which we can see on that painting, and we're getting UV overlap here and here. Sometimes Unity doesn't like dealing with long, thin UVs, but all in all, I don't think that's too bad. Yeah, we've definitely got some problems there. So if you're suffering from this kind of thing, again, well, first of all, this is a really good way of evaluating that, the UV overlap, and you may want to consider unwrapping these objects yourself if Unity is having a tough time. There may be a better way to do it if we select this and go to the inspector and have a look at these light map settings. Scaling light map, yeah, default parameters. Well, there's one more thing that we can do actually. So let's go back to the shaded view of this. I mean, it's not bad, I mean, but you can see that error there. There's something weird going on there. It doesn't know what to do with it. But what I'm going to do is carry on with the light settings. So I've cranked these up. That's great. Light map resolution 60. The light map size is 1024. I might even double that. This isn't the size that it will be. This is the biggest it can be. So it might still only need, I mean, you can see one directional light map, 1024 by 1024. It still might only need 1024 by 1024 and not actually need to go to a 2048 light map. The thing that determines that is the light map resolution. If I push this up to 120, I like double what it is now, well then it would use that. And if this was set to 124 by 1024 and I push this up to 120, it'd probably give me a message saying object has reached its maximum size in the light map or something like that. So it's sort of playing with these two things really. Compressed light maps is on. I'm actually going to turn that off. It might give us a slightly better quality, although maybe not. It may not be that noticeable. The other thing is this light map parameters at the bottom. So it's on default medium at the moment. I'm actually going to create a new one. And like a new post-processing profile, it's created this new light map parameters. So now the scene is using these parameters. So if we click on these parameters and go to inspector, we can have a look at some of the settings here. Okay, so we've got a load of stuff up the top we can completely ignore because this is under pre-computed real-time GI. We're not using that. If I go back to lighting, we're using baked mixed lighting here, and as you can see, we've turned off the real-time lighting. So all of these settings up top can be completely disregarded. Anti-aliasing samples, they're basically smoothing out of the samples as far as I'm aware. Let's see what the bubble says. The maximum number of times to super sample a texel to reduce aliasing. Progressive Lightmapper super samples the position and normal buffers, blah blah blah. It basically smooths it out. So let's double that. The push off and the bake tag, they can remain the same. Now if we go down to backface tolerance, I've had in scenes before where we're getting errors like this here, and it's nothing to do with overlapping light maps. In fact, did I look at that in the UV overlap? Let's have a look. Well, there's no overlapping UVs there, so that obviously isn't the problem. And sometimes it's the fact that this backface tolerance is too high. So I'm actually going to lower this. I wonder what the bubble says about this. The percentage of rays shot from an output texel that must hit front faces to be considered usable. Right, okay, well I'm going to lower this to 0.4 and see if that helps. So, yeah, that's our settings now, our light map parameters for this. So I'm going to do a final bake at this ridiculous... well, actually, that's not even ridiculous. You'd probably want more than that for a final bake, depending on the scene and the size and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to bake this and we'll come back in a minute. Okay, the bake is done. And, yeah, we're looking good. And looky here. Oh, look, that problem that we were having is gone. And I highly suspect, in fact, I'm pretty sure, that that issue was caused by this push-off value. Where is it? There we go. Yeah, this backface tolerant value even. I think that was what the issue was. So let's give this a little play and see what we can see. In fact, let me come out of that and maximize. Go to our game window, maximize on play. Play. Boom. Okay, so that's looking good. The dithering's okay actually, it's not too bad. That looks alright. Yeah, so that's it guys. Yeah, that's how you use the Progressive Lightmapper. And we got some extra bonus stuff on top of that as well, with the light probes, reflection probes. We've also done some post-processing as well. So that's a real sort of basic, simple look at how to get a half-decent result out of the Progressive Lightmapper. For my viewers on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell to get tutorial notifications. You can also check me out at digitalmeat.uk, where you can filter my tutorials by category. You can also follow me on social media, links in the description and the footer of my website. If you'd like to support Digital Meat, this can be done via Patreon or the support page on the website. But if you'd like to support Digital Meat and get extra tutorial content, you can purchase the Prime membership in the store at digitalmeat.uk. For winding down, I have a second channel called Beef Doctor, where I do game streams. Link in the description and the footer of my website. Okay, thanks for watching guys, bye!